All right, thank you all for joining. And like I said, we hope that we'll continue to go on. Sandra, yes, I can see you. All right, excellent. So now I'm just going to start immediately. The essence of this session, I'll share my screen and maybe I'll be going in and out of my screen and the personal view. But the essence of this session really was the fact that we are supposed to have met ordinarily in April, those of us who have been part of the platform before. And the fact that there's a lockdown plus me being out and the environment we're in, however, just was either we will not do anything at all, or we would continue to use technology, which is the way it's our new normal. Therefore, this is hoping that through this platform, we can still be able to engage and keep the benefits of the double impact co-preneurs meetings positive until we're able to have our own what's it called, physical meetings. Okay, so I'll just ask all of us to please mute again for until we get to like Q&A points. So let me make the first sets of presentations. And you will also forgive me, I don't have someone working with me. So if I look a bit distracted at times, it's because I'm getting chats from people who are trying to connect and having some difficulty. So this is the height of multitasking. It is testing all my skills. I have 3 devices in front of me. Yeah, thank you all so much. Please mute and then we will start. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, so this is us today in a presentation which we have themed Blindsided. And I think it's, since most of us are familiar with the platform, I will skip the first few slides where I was just trying to explain what the Double Impact platform is really about and jump into the main conversation. But if anybody needs me to just stop and make a comment around the platform, please feel free to ask, because I know that 1 or 2 of those who registered are completely new to the platform. So we will just talk a bit about what happens with life when plans and realities are put in perspective. Ask the issue of what questions should we be asking ourselves in this season? What lessons should we be learning? And of course, try to articulate some kind of action plans to see how we can successfully navigate this time as co-preneurs in our homes and in our businesses, okay? Now, this was a slight introduction of myself. Like I said, I'm going to jump all this. Just allow me to do that. Okay, so let's begin. Now, when you look at the graphic, I hope all of you can see my screen. Let me know if you can't. The diagram that is on top kind of is the way that we assume life would be, you know, so that I don't mean now as adults, but you know, in our younger years, we kind of had a sense of a smooth sailing. So you go to school, you graduate, you come out, you get a job or you start a business, you get married, you have children, and it's happily ever after in a sense. But you and I know that reality is very different from that. Reality looks more like what we have at the bottom, where sometimes you fall into a ditch, is a rocky terrain, you have to climb your way out. Sometimes it seems like you're just moving a bit progressively. Sometimes it's like life has not only drowned you in a kind of deep water, but it has even covered you as well. All your efforts are not adding up to anything. And sometimes if you continue going forward, there are some very intense low periods in our lives where it's cloudy, it's stormy, it's dark, it's gloomy. And the next thing you know, there's another peak in our lives, you know, and this is how life just tends to play out. Now, all these ups and downs, all these rocky areas and stormy times, these are essentially times when life has blindsided us. When we were progressing, it looked like we had achieved a certain kind of stability, and then things just begin to hit at us left, right, and center. And I'm sure it is our collective experience. And I'm sure this is probably why even in the Bible, Jesus has said to us that in this life you will have trouble, but you should be at peace because he has overcome. But the reality of we will have trouble is exactly what we're facing at this time. And you remember that in Proverbs 19 and verse 21, it says that many are the plans in a man's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. In fact, I like the Message version better. It says, we humans, we keep brainstorming options and plans, but God's purpose will prevail. Certainly, this is not the time where we begin to discuss whether COVID-19 is God's purpose or not. The way I choose to look at it, and I hope you do as well, is the fact that even in the Bible, Job went through so many things and God sanctioned it, but there was a greater glory at the other end of it. So with human minds, human understanding, it looked like Job was being dealt with by God, but God was going somewhere. And that's why we continue to be encouraged that there is something better on the other side of it. We've done all our planning, we've done all our strategizing, we've paid consultants, we've done so many things, but one thing called COVID has taken global prominence, and it has made, in fact, somebody said to me yesterday, it was an oil and gas webinar I was in, and somebody said it has put all of us in a force majeure situation. I'm sure you know what that means. But for me, the beauty is still that ultimately it's about the God purpose, and we have to stay in the place of trust that God has a purpose for you and for me, for our families and for our businesses outside of the whole COVID thing. But this is our reality, that by COVID-19, life has thrown us a major curveball. It is a major blindsiding. Nobody saw this coming. And if we want to be fair and real, for those of us in certain parts of the world, we also kind of stepped back and were watching how it was happening elsewhere. And many of us did not begin to do a COVID-19 strategizing early enough. This is our reality. So many businesses have been impacted. There are some businesses that have been outrightly decimated. People who are in travel and tourism, people who are in types of consulting, people, people, especially in training and things, because now that's just gone. People who are in certain kinds of manufacturing. And for me here, I'm in Canada, one of the things that has happened here is that the restaurants are closed down. So some of them are able to do like delivery businesses, but many of them are closed down, like 100% shut, totally decimated. Because we're in business together, what has happened is that for us, our family purses are impacted. Remember, we earn from the same source in most cases. And the challenge is now one of equality of life. And the problem is that our responsibilities and the demands of our lives, they have not shifted. Now, in all this, then, many of us are being forced into a tech space that some of us are uncomfortable with. I'm very happy with myself personally, because I've always tried to keep in that tech space. Like, I refuse to be a tech dinosaur. But even at that, I'm being tested, like all my abilities. I've been on YouTube, I've been on several webinars, just trying to learn how I can use technology better in my business and in my personal life. Some people are totally in the dark about this, and that even compounds all that is going on for them. From a relationship point of view, excuse me for laughing, but the sands have shifted too soon for many of us. So some of us were waiting for the period when the children would have left home before we start getting back into the place of a self-discovery of each other. Some of us, that excuse we used to have for not spending time together on the personal side was that we're busy, we have meetings, we have projects. And so as entrepreneurs, we're always busy, and many times we're together, but we were not together. This has changed that, because we're on lockdown and we're forced to look each other eyeball to eyeball, heart to heart, and ask whether we're still in the same place we used to be. And the truth is, in many cases, there have been extreme tensions. When you think about the fact that some of us, our relationships were already not in the best place, and now there's pressures and things putting us in a small space together, it's a tense situation. And for all of us, whether as individuals or collectively, we're dealing with one thing. It's a fight for supremacy. There is fear and uncertainty on one hand, and on the other hand, there is faith and trust. And it's a fine, constant balancing, depending on the news you get, the article you read, the phone call you have, to try to find which one of them is winning at any point in time. For some of us, our children are complicating issues, and I don't mean complications necessarily in a bad way. If you are one of those who has very young children, for instance, honestly, I think that as much as you might have enlightened them about COVID, There is, you know, a child is a child. They still want to play. They still want to run around. They don't understand your concerns about your bottom line and so on and so forth. So sometimes it is frustrating. Or some of us are dealing with situations where now we are forced to be in the same space with teenage children that we already didn't understand when we saw them little, but now we're having to deal with them more. And really, if I dare say, all nerves are being tested. Now, here's the way I look at it in summary. There is cabin fever. I don't know about you, but even though I'm able to walk around my apartment from room to room, even though once in a while I can go outside and just walk in the park for a few minutes and come downstairs, I am really just tired of this box, and it's putting its own pressure on me. Now, like I said earlier, there is the fear, there is the uncertainty. Then there are the pressures of business. Look, for us particularly, we're impacted left, right, center. It's almost like every new email is bringing a new set of issues. Then there are financial pressures that go with this. I mean, business is where we feed from, is what provides the buffer for our family. And then, of course, we had all these plans to grow our businesses. We have all these people who are dependent on our businesses. We have existing and new marital challenges that are coming up and we're having to deal with. There's the pressure from the children and external families too. So some of us have some family members perhaps we would rather not have had around us, but they got stuck living with us, or we had to bring them to live with us because of health concerns. It brings its own sets of pressures. And we're concerned about ourselves on one hand, we're concerned about our loved ones on the other hand, thinking about parents in the village, thinking about some family members who have health challenges. And the complication for me that has the greatest weight is that of not even being sure when all this is going to end. It is really distressing. I had shared in the video inviting us to this webinar that I find myself in Canada, not because it was the plan. I was supposed to have been here for 3 weeks. I came for a training program, quick visit to my children, and then go back home. I've now been here for, I think it's either 6 or 7 weeks. I'm not even sure anymore. I've kind of lost track of time. My husband, on the other hand, is alone in Nigeria. That was certainly not the plan. And we don't know when this will end. There's no line of sight as to when I may see him next or when I may go home next. That's really crazy. And then, of course, there's all sorts of other situations we're already dealing with, or which maybe in your particular circumstance is coming up. And for me, what this means is that we're all operating under a highly distressing and potentially explosive set of situations. I hope you can relate with that. In fact, I don't need to ask. I'm sure our realities are very, very much similar to each other. Now, the only thing is this: there is always an unless. There is always an unless. And that's part of why I felt there was a need for us to still have this session in the midst of all what is going on, that there is need for us to just stop and take stock of a few things and decide how we want to move going forward. So perspective. One, this is literally a period of the trials of our faith. So this is a period where, for me as a minister, for instance, a lot of the messages I've preached to other people, they are staring me in the face, and it's now a case of, Audrey, can you now walk the talk? All the things that the scriptures we have held on to and anchored on, this is the time where we begin to really know what we believe and whether at the point of pressing, we're able to stay in the place of what we believe. So we all know this Psalm, for instance, Psalm 91. Many of us can quote it right from the beginning to the end. I just picked out a few things. In verse 3, it says that he would rescue us from every trap and he would protect us from deadly disease, such as the COVID-19. If we really believe that, why are we somewhat anxious about COVID-19? And it doesn't mean, please let me get this clear, it doesn't mean we should avoid social distancing. It doesn't mean we won't wash our hands. It doesn't mean we will not be careful about where we go and how we transact. But for some of us, there is a literal fear that has taken roots in us. But this same scripture tells us not to dread the disease that stalks in darkness, or the disaster that strikes at noonday. 1,000 will fall at our side, 10,000 at our right hand, but these evils will not touch us. I am so, by the grace of God, I have such a confidence that whatever happens in all this, I'm going to come out stronger. And for me, it's just an embodiment of this scripture, it means I've internalized it. It doesn't mean that things won't happen, but I believe God, I'm coming out stronger. And so it's really a case of constantly touching base and asking God, what am I supposed to do with this season? What do you want me to learn? What do you want me to know? It says that Romans 8:28, all things, he will cause them to work for good. He didn't say he will cause all good things to work for good. He said all things. That means there will be some good, there will be some bad. There will be some we understand, some we don't understand. This scripture is the scripture that is like a bed I lie on, that all things will work together for good. So even as I'm looking at all this, I have an approach that is even like, you know what, even if COVID takes my life, because I'm sure I'm going to heaven, it's not a problem now. Shebi, Paul said to die is gain. It's not a problem. But in this period, though, I don't believe God is going to take my life. I just believe he's going to cause me to see some things, cause you to see some things, so that we can thrive in this season. And if nothing else, I would like you to hold on to this scripture, Isaiah 45 and verse 3. Because here God says that he will give us the treasures of darkness and hidden riches of secret places. If there is any doubt, any certainty, I should say, it is the fact that currently we are in darkness. That's what we're seeing across the world. It's a very dark time. But in this time, there are some people who are going to get phenomenal business ideas, and they will not just be COVID business ideas. There'll be business ideas that will be sustainable. There are some people who are going to create global presence out of what they're doing. There's some people who are going to create new lines of revenue. Just there's so much creativity that can be mined in this season. So if you anchor on this and just keep asking God to show you the treasures in this dark time, you'll be shocked what he can do with you if you place a pull on his intelligence, which is what I am doing. Now, it also talks about the hidden riches of secret places. And this to me speaks about things we haven't yet begun to think about. In this time, some of us are going to apply ourselves in a way that even things we have as just normal gifts, your ability to speak, your ability to write, your ability to cook, something, God will use that to unfold a business opportunity, in an income stream, and so on, because he is God and he is our Father. This, for me, is the perspective that I've chosen to adopt for this season. And I hope that as I'm speaking, you're at least connecting to the fact that we will come out stronger depending a lot on what we allow in our mind space. Perspective is key. Perspective is also about making those intentional choices. You know, if you've been around me enough, you've heard me talk about responding instead of reacting. What that means, like I said earlier, there's phone calls, there's information, there's some of us are glued to news channels. Some of us are in WhatsApp groups where it's a constant battering with negative information. And then we begin to plan, we begin to take some decisions, we begin to react to people based on all that negativity. I choose not to react. In fact, I've cut off many things. I just touch base once in a while to get a sense of, okay, what did they say? And I move out immediately, because my choice is to use this season to grow, is to use this season to pull out every kind of productivity that is within me. And it's really exciting journey. It's me deciding that, look, I just want to take this time and hear God more, because I've been too busy in the past to give the kind of attention that was required. What kind of perspective will you choose to adopt in this season? And this is a question for you personally, and then it's a question for you as a couple. So the issue of questions is key. My coach, Coach Anna McCoy, she did a Facebook session early this year, which she called Future Ready. And I remember one thing she said that I just can't forget. She said that questions, they are the currency of the future. For us to thrive going forward, it's going to be about questions, questions, questions. And so part of today's session, in talking about when life tries to blindside you, or when life literally does blindside you, how do you get past that? What kind of questions should you be asking at this time? Because you see, there is a lesson in everything. Now, some of us can get so embroiled in and frantic about the things that are happening, or we can just constantly be stepping back and asking, what lessons should we get at this time? What can we mine out of this situation? And there's an intentionality that goes with that. Every time there is a problem, for as many people as are running around, there's some people who just sit back, they are watching, they're asking questions, and they seem to always come out stronger. That's what I'm hoping that all of us collectively can do by the end of this webinar and as we go forward. So I want to ask some questions. And as I'm speaking, please, I'm going to share the slides for as many as will request. I will share the slides with you. Very happy to do that. But if you have questions, you have a chat box which you can use to drop your questions, and I can stop and look at any questions. I don't see any chats currently. If you have any questions, please feel free to do that. But I have questions for you that I hope that will kind of tweak your thinking. And then as I'm asking, please take the time to think through your responses. So what has the pandemic taught you? For instance, about your business, let's start from there. Do you need to rethink your business model? Because you see, one thing that is so clear, there is no normal after all this. In fact, somebody was saying 2 days ago that, well, you know, the people are very funny, that at the end of all this now, within 3 weeks, we'll all go back to business as usual. And I don't doubt that for some people, that's exactly what's going to happen. But I think for those of us that are God's own, who choose to journey this thing with him, we will do ourselves the biggest disservice if at the end of all this, we just start acting like it never happened. You need to be able to look at your business and ask, is this the best way I could be operating? Think about your operations. Is it the most efficient, best that it could be? Think about your recruitment strategy. What are you going to do about it? So in my organizations, my company, for instance, just before all this started, we had actually done this huge restructuring because we had this big vision about the things we wanted to do. And we created some positions for the now, for the midterm, for the future. We readjusted a few things. We created new departments. We reworked the entire department functioning, the entire job descriptions for every role, reporting lines, and so on and so forth. Guess what? COVID has taken almost all of that and put it in a box and said, I'll see you later. We're having to rethink. So even the few people that we had given recruitment, engagement letters rather, we've had to ask them to stop. There's nothing to, they cannot report to anywhere, right? We're now having to think how we can create an online onboarding model, which we never had before. Onboarding was a physical process about 1 week long, where you would go through the different departments, go through our different sites, and then somebody will be attached to you for a period as your body, just to help you in that process for about a month. A coach will be attached to you and so on. All that cannot happen now because, I mean, we were not ready. So those people have been put on pause. All the other positions have been put on pause, but even the people we have, we're having to rethink them. Who are the people we really have? In this period where we're working from home, and I don't know if you've had this experience, we are finding that some people, I'm sorry, do not seem to be as relevant to the business as they seem to be when we were physically in the office. Some people literally have no work. Even if you just think about the drivers and the office assistants or the front desk officer, for instance, at this point in time, they are on holiday. Now, we were planning, for instance, to change some vehicles we've had for a long time. But guess what? In this whole COVID lockdown thing, we found out that Uber actually has some kind of service that they offer to businesses, and they function like a carpool for you on the side. So a huge chunk that would have been in our budget to go and change some really broken down vehicles we had, the maintenance cost was getting too high. That is now going out because we can't afford to spend that money. We're looking at how to outsource various elements of our service and just keep a lean, mean structure. What are you doing? And what is it teaching you? The people you've recruited, if you've recruited, you know, this mistake we made, we recruited friends and family because we needed to help someone and they are now more a liability. How do you move past this going forward? Because you see, after COVID, there's going to be a period of recovery. And we need every efficiency that we can mine in this season. I hope you understand what I'm saying. Is there a place for automation in your business? And what more can you do with technology? Since we've been having virtual meetings, it's amazing the level of productivity that we're seeing, even though we're not physically in the office. And that's even a lesson in terms of how we want to run the business going forward, how we can do more flexible work hours, and not so much just because of work-life balance, but even from a cost point of view, because certainly there are some costs that are cut off when people are not always physically in the office, even if it's just that gen that doesn't have to be running from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day. You need to think about your business and see what else you can get. What kind of fat do you need to trim? What are the nice to haves, but they are not necessary, that you had in your company, right? Can you look at it and maybe like us feel that remote working might be a better way to go forward in the long term? Do you want to look at your leadership style? How are you leading in this point, at this point in time when people are not physically there? How are you able to engage with your people? And then perhaps you want to look now at your key man risk. The key man is that one person or those two people in your organization that somehow everything revolves around them. They're the ones you're always trying to keep happy because you feel that if they were to leave, a lot of things will break down. At this period, at this point in time when we're all working from home, have you noticed that your key men are not as key as they seem? Or if they're still key, but they're now making themselves unavailable sometimes, does it not tell you that you need to use this period and create a framework around them whereby you can take away some of that dependency that your business has on those people and see how you share it so that even if they choose to walk or God forbid something else happens to them, the business doesn't have to suffer? Yes, I see there's a question, so I'll just pause. You need the slide. Okay, you are showing as anonymous, so send me your email, please. You're showing as an anonymous person. Send the email now or after the session, and then I will, oh, anything, excellent. Okay, excellent, I will do that, thank you. All right, so the last thing about the business is now, do you want to restructure how you and your spouse are working together? Good, I see more comments, questions. Okay, it's the same one, thank you very much. Right, so if you think about how you and your spouse are working, is there a need to restructure, to rethink it? And the reason I thought this was important is because, like I said, here I am, I'm in Canada, a 5-hour time difference. My husband and my staff and my employees are all in Lagos, though one of them got caught also in the East. But we're able to use technology and we're making it work, and it doesn't even seem like I'm not there. So how can you people so segregate your roles, your responsibilities? How do you create a work relationship between two of you that the system can still function even if distance becomes a problem? How do you even between yourselves create that technology bandwidth so that your business doesn't suffer? Again, as entrepreneurs, we tend to be the top two people in our organizations. We are the ones that set the tone and leadership across board. So it cannot be, for instance, that because Audrey got stuck in Canada, then nothing else happens. No, somebody must step up, fill the gap, and then she herself, while she's away, she must now create that framework that she's still able to provide the support that is required if she were physically present in the country. Okay, so I don't know if we have any comments at this point, otherwise I will continue, and then maybe we take the comments or Q&A at the end. Okay, all right, that's fine. Now let's continue and now talk about financing, because this is a huge one. All the other things we've talked about the business before were about the model, about recruitment, about the operation strategy, and so on and so forth, technology. But all those things, you know, as business people, they come and they land squarely on the table of financing. So in this period, with all that is going on, what have you learned? Or what are you learning about your business finances, right? Are you as robust as you thought? Or if you didn't think you were robust, have you actually found that in a way, the kind of approach you took has helped you to deal better in this season? So when you look at your company, your business, and please, I keep repeating, we're talking about doing this together, people. When you look at it from a cash flow and a liquidity management point of view, how have you fared? Some of us just keep, you know, investing in this, investing in that, and there is no cash. Or we keep giving such credit terms that all our money is in receivables. Honestly, anybody that has a lot of receivables at this period, I don't know what to say. It's a difficult period because even those who are supposed to pay you are hoping that someone else will pay them, or they will have the money, but they will hold on to it. So how have you been managing liquidity? Do you want to use this period and just stop and ask a few questions about how your business has dealt with cash and liquidity management? What kind of capital structure do you have in the company? What's your financing strategy? So a lot of us are, I know, very averse to debt. Some of us even wax biblical. The Bible says you should not borrow and owe no man and all that. But do you know that in this time, if you had smart debt, and when I say smart debt, I'm talking about debt that is, you have the cash flows to support, you negotiated the interest very well, you had done a robust review of the various options of funding that are available to you before you stepped into anyone, you might actually be in a very good place. So yesterday I was in a meeting with one of my staff, and he had come up with the assignment they had was to try to think through survival and thrive strategies in this season. And one of his recommendations was that we should quickly pay down our debt. You know, so when we were discussing his recommendations, we got to that. I had to step back and educate him a bit to say, no, actually, for us, because we've worked mostly with DFIs or, you know, with strategic funding, is either single digits or at best a 10%. And they are long-term funds that it's actually cheaper for us to hold on to our cash and just be paying the interest in this period, because we need to be liquid. We have projects that are running, we have salaries to pay, we have different things that need to happen. So we're not just suddenly going to say, go and pay all the debts down. Then when I'm trying to explain to my staff, I can't pay salaries because we paid down debts, you know, they will just come back and say, that's what she'll be saying, but she's in Canada. I think you know what I mean, right? So you need to look at how you've been funding your business. What kind of assets do you have? A lot of us tend to invest in non-income generating assets, whereas we should be focused on assets that can still create a yield for us. What kind of relationships have you had with your bankers? If you haven't been in close interface with your bankers, honestly, between this time and when we come out of this, that's a relationship you must cultivate. Because if they know you, it is easier for them to be flexible when it comes to some of your requirements or when it comes to some of your obligations. In terms of investor relations, for those of us who may have external partners, whether private equity or venture capital, those are relationships that need to be closely tracked. Good enough thing, most of them are aware what is going on and they know it's global. That said, if their investment is at risk, your constant accountability, reporting, updating, and keeping them abreast of what you're trying to do in this season, is very key. That information is key. This is a period to ask yourself, how can we diversify our revenues? So out of this one business that we're doing, what else can we do? And if not, what other unrelated business can we do? I remember my friend, Sister B, some of you know her. There was an example she gave years ago, I've never forgotten, when she was ministering and she was talking about trying to use what you have to create multiple streams of income. And this was out of the scripture that refers to the Garden of Eden. This is not the time for that, but it's about the 4 streams out of the Garden of Eden. And then she gave an example. She said, for instance, if you run a dry cleaning company, that, you know, apart from dry cleaning services, you can do a spin-off business where you do repairs. That's, you know, these buttons and tears and things like that. She says you can do a spin-off business where you train people how to start other dry cleaning companies. And then, of course, the 4th thing I think was then maybe going to open a branch in a different location and so on. And it was just so bringing to the fore how with the same thing you have, you may be able to create value out of it. If you are a consultant and you've been offering a particular stream of services, in the face of what is going on globally now, you perhaps want to ask what other baskets of trainings can we put, or bundles of trainings can we put together that is meeting specific needs at this time. And the fact that the entire globe is on lockdown actually in a sense means that you've created, the pandemic has created a much bigger audience. So maybe you should be asking, who else can we partner with in Accra, in Philadelphia, in where else? Just create those linkages and offer a higher value training to a broader audience. This time is a time when you want to question, how have you been working treasury operations? And somebody may be asking, what do you mean by that? So when you talk about treasury, you have to step back as a business and ask, what is our mindset about excess cash? Every time you have 10 million, 20 million, 50 million, 100 million in your account, even if you need to deploy it for something in 1 week's time, you can fix that money, you can put it on call, you can do something. Every extra kobo you earn as interest, it counts. So this is a time for you to maybe look back on your books and see how well you did with the monies in your bank account. There's no reason why you should have money in your current account, honestly. You just need some mini cash to get through the week. Every excess amount, use it. There's money market instruments. Even if the rates have crashed, they are still adding more value than it just sitting there, so we can tap ourselves on the shoulder and say, I have 20 million in my account, I have 50 million in my account. In my business, as at 2 years ago, we made so much money out of treasury bills and bonds and money market instruments that one of my directors started to laugh and say whether our business had become banking operations or something like that. But it was a commendation to management. And this last year, of course, because of what happened with rates and all that, it wasn't as good. But even till today, we are constantly in my office, finance people are always talking about, let's take advantage of this, let's take advantage of that. So there is a constant scanning of the environment, which rate is doing better than what, who is offering what, where can we place this for what period, and so on and so forth. So treasury management is really key. And this is a good time for you to step back and ask yourself some of those questions and see what kind of strategies you can put in place. The same thing with hedging. Many of us are now doing businesses where we have to transact globally, and yet all our resources are in Naira. I hear as at yesterday, I don't know, like I said, I'm not in the country, but I hear as at yesterday, the dollar was doing about 430 or something like that. If you have anything you were supposed to order from overseas, whether or not you can get it now is not the issue. What the issue is now is that you will need more money to get it. But if you had a dollar hedge, that would have taken care of a few of these things. So these are the kinds of things that you need to use the benefit of this forced lockdown in the pandemic to have internal strategy sessions with yourself and see how we move this forward. At the same time though, here we are, our personal finances in the same bucket, the same source from our business finances. So this now brings us to start asking some questions as to how well we've done with a few things. Do you have savings? What are your savings like? Or have you just been living day to day? So even if you had savings, how disciplined were you about those savings? Because it's one thing to have savings and then every time you have a need, you quickly go back there. As God has helped me, I have gotten to a place, I got to a place several years ago where sometimes I am so broke that even I have to remind myself that there is something somewhere. Because the discipline of not touching my savings, I imbibed it after my children were sent out of school for the second time, and I had to go through humble pie to find money to get them back into school. And I swore that this will not happen again. And so I started to save. My husband and I created an account. We started to save in that account to make sure that whatever happened, we'll always have school fees. And I've never let that discipline go. It is at times like this that you see the benefit of depriving yourself of a few things that are totally non-essentials. Where are you also investing? Now, I know that some people like to invest in gold. And please, let me just say again, I've said it before, when you talk about investing in gold, especially our ladies, it's not gold jewelry, please. It is gold bars. Gold jewelry is depreciating. When you go, even the Malam in Balogun will tell you what year it came out and he will price you down. If you want to do gold bars. So this is not, maybe now is not the time to be discussing what will you invest in, but the question is, what have you invested in? And then when we come out of this, what might you reasonably be able to invest in? How liquid are you? You can't pay school fees with assets. You can't with real estate, for instance, but it's good to have real estate because you have to have different classes of assets. How have you diversified what you own? How have you diversified where you own things? Is all your money in one bank? Is that a smart thing to do? Are all your assets in the same? Are they all in Lekki? Are they all in Ikorodu? You have to be able to diversify. Whatever you've done thus far is really not the conversation of today. It is to say that we want to spend this time and think about what we should be doing from this time going forward. You want to think about your spending habits. So in this season, we're not going anywhere. We're not buying Ashebi. We're not even buying gifts. We're not, I mean, come on, we just have to sit back and then ask ourselves, so really, what was I spending on? And coming out of this, what should I be spending on? I always remember, I think it is Proverbs 6:6 or 6:16. I will check that. I think it's Proverbs 6:6. It talks about us observing the ant and seeing how the ant conducts their affairs. And essentially ends by talking about how even though they have no king over them, nobody's watching over them, but they're always actively preparing for their winter years. Many of us in the platform community, we are not below 40 anymore. So we need to be actively preparing for winter years so that we're not dependent on children, dependent on handouts from people, but we're able to hold our own in everything. This is a good time to think about how you're managing your finances, whether you need help. You might not be able to go into the stock market, but you want to perhaps put money in mutual funds and then know that you have a buffer for tomorrow. Do you want to look at your pension and add like a retirement savings elements into your contributions and so on? And then lastly, on the Double Impact platform, if you remember, for those who were there, I think it was last year, we brought in Binta Max Benije, we brought in Fabian Ajogu to talk to us about wealth management and legacy provisions. Do you have a trust? Is there something that, God forbid, if something happened to you now or sometime soon, and please, I did say God forbid, there is something that you have provisioned so that your children will be taken care of, at least until they get past a stage of dependency. This is a good time as a couple to settle down and think about setting up a trust, writing your wills, and making sure that there is actual legacy planning that is happening beyond I'm building a business, I'm busy, I'm hustling. Right. So as a couple, this is also a good time for us to look at ourselves. How do we improve ourselves? It gives us the opportunity to ask why distance came in. What were the things? How do we become friends again? Many of us are not in that place. Some of us are, and that's excellent, but many of us are not. So how can you use this season to study your spouse, study yourself? And when you do some self-reflection and you're able to see where your own gaps are, you become more accepting, accommodating of your spouse. Can you use this season to get back to where you used to play with each other before? Where you could sit down and talk for hours on end and not necessarily about the business. There are things, like I said earlier, we must mine out of this season. Apart from doing all the business things, remember, this is the Double Impact platform. It's double impact. We've talked about business, re-strategizing for business, financing, and all that, but there is also us. How can we become better as us in this season? We actually have an opportunity to find a greater alignment with each other, to come up with shared strategies so that we thrive, no matter how difficult the situation is. And one of the things I find is really useful for us as couples is to ask ourselves what needs to shift in the way that we interact with each other, in the way that we discuss issues, in the way that we spend time to each other, in how romantic we are, in just different elements of our relationship, without casting blame, without going into, and that's how that time, or for things, for you are always, no, get those things out of the way and find what can you both agree needs to shift in this your personal space, even in the way you work together, so that you are always winning. This COVID pandemic lockdown has just given us beautiful time to literally stop and self-evaluate. And I think that it would be unfortunate if we don't take advantage of that in this season to see what we can do, okay? All right, so I don't have any questions still, so I just want to keep running to the end because I'm trying to be mindful of our time. And since there are not too many of us on the live webinar, at the end of this, I'm going to unmute everybody so that if there is need for question and answers, we can have a collective shared engagement for a few minutes before we wrap up. So next slide would now be talking about you being able to extend this issue of asking questions to every area of your life. So in this season, what are you learning about your children? I'm here, and by the grace of God, my children are all with me. I have watched my first two sons have just started work. They're in the training program with the bank that they both luckily got a job in the same bank. And just watching them evolve as men, I think that's a very interesting dynamic. Then my younger two, the one in university and the one doing his grade 12, watching them, how they're interacting with their online school, the discipline with which they're applying themselves. I mean, I've not had to call one of them one day to say, is it not time for your classes and all that? And then having the privilege to sometimes just sit back and listen to all of them as they engage with each other. And I'm hearing things even about the kind of parents we have been over years, some very funny things they remind us of that just made me learn new things about how we've parented. Some I'm glad for, I'm grateful to see the outcome, but there are some things my children have shared with me. Honestly, I've internally been asking myself, are you kidding? This is the kind of thing your parents would have done and you'd be rolling your eyes. You know, so it's a good time to also reflect. As fathers, how am I connected with my daughter? How am I connected with my sons? As a mother, the same thing. Then as parents together, are we really parenting together? Or are we using our children to play parental ping pong and to see who wins? You never actually win in such situations. What's the dynamic of your family? What are you learning about that? Before, people were going to school, going to work, so you only good morning in the morning, good evening, and maybe a few sentences here or there. Now you're all together. What are you seeing? What are you observing? What needs to shift? What can you do better? You know, do you want to start having a meal a week on the table? Something. You have to use this time well. We really just have to. Okay? The same thing with our in-laws and extended families. Good time to reach out to them. Good time to question some of the relationships we've had that haven't been working. Why? How can we resolve them? Remembering that we have an accountability to God, and personally, you will not be explaining to God anything about your mother-in-law or father-in-law or sister-in-law. You'll be explaining your own role in trying to make that relationship dynamic work. And then lastly, I will say that it's a good time to also try to ask yourself in this time, what am I learning about me? Right? What am I learning about me? I am using this period to try to pull out of myself as much value, as much as I feel is my purpose. I mean, this webinar is, if it looks easy to you, I promise you it is not. I've had to Google, I've watched so many YouTube videos. What do I need to do? How do I want to be sure I'm adding value? I'm not just showing up in a webinar for the sake of showing up. I want to be sure that people who listen go back. I'm writing more. And you know, this has to be useful time. And it's me coming back to the realization that the things that fulfill me the most are not really that my business is making so much money or anything like that, or that my name is being mentioned here or there. It's when I'm connected with people and I know that my life is adding value to them. So what are you learning about yourself in this season? And how can you come out of this season as a better version of you? If you've had a tendency to procrastinate, have you identified why that may be? I have realized, for instance, that the minute I put on my TV in the morning, I'm having a less productive day. So much as I enjoy Netflix and all that, the days that I really want to work, I promise you that TV is staying off rather. And then at best, it becomes a reward for myself in the evening, if at all. Think about yourself. Let this not just be time where we're complaining, where we are fearful, and where our discussions only center, our thinking only centers around how many have died, how many, what they said, whether it's chloroquine or not chloroquine. There must be something more beneficial that we get out of this season. So what will we do? And this for me is where the meat of everything I've been saying is. When you have taken the time, as I hope you will, to go through intense questioning, get a notebook. Habakkuk 2:2 says we should write the vision, we should make it plain so that he that sees it will run with it. Amos 3:3 says that can two work together except they be agreed. If you'll be willing, as I pray you would be, to together sit down, ask yourself some of these questions and many more. I mean, I wrote what the things that I'm asking myself, but there could be more questions that you think are necessary for us to look at from a business point of view, more questions that you think are necessary for us to look at from a relational point of view, and just generally speaking as entrepreneurs. And if you have some of those questions, please feel free to share them with me as well, okay? But more importantly, when we have done all those discussions and writing things down, we must then also end in the place of having firm action plans. We must. See, there are some things we need to re-strategize about, that's very clear. Whether it's the way we do our business or the way we've been doing life as a couple, the way we've been living as a family, that is necessary. So my company, we just recently engaged, just before all this started, we had engaged consultants to do our next 5-year strategy. Just a minute. and next year 5-year strategic plan. And you know what? Even they have had to kind of stop and rethink what they were doing, because the dynamics of the landscape has changed absolutely. So for them to come up with something that is fully workable, even they are having to go back to the drawing board. So yes, you're going to have to re-strategize. Whatever you come out of it with, please document it. Even if it's something that you still hand over to consultants to embed into what they're working on, you and your spouse have something clear. There are things you need to reprioritize. So some of the things we have positioned as being more important, certainly this is the time for us to rethink them. You know what? For many of us, we have taken the priority step as God, business, family, or sometimes business, family, God. This is a time to reprioritize. God must always be first. It's a good time to press in deep to your relationship with Him, to be able to hear what He's saying, to be able to receive even those divine insights. He's the one that gives visions in the night, remember. He's the one, He can see past any situation. He's the one that knows the end of a thing from the beginning. And He's the one that says He will work it all out for good. So what better person to go to say, Lord, I kind of need you to help me see this the way you see it. And I need to know what I'm supposed to be learning in this season. I need clarity as to what we're supposed to be doing. And if you hold hands and pray together, there will be confirmation from both of you. So if you put it as God first, and then, please forgive me, God first, and then you also then take your family and put your family in that place, put your relationship into perspective, make sure that you're making room for, after all this prayerfully date night. But even while we're in this space, you know that people are having online parties, right? I've heard of birthday parties being done online. So you and your spouse can create movie nights in your home. Do popcorn in your house if you have. Spend some time together, reconnect, reprioritize your family relationships, okay? Then even within maybe your business, look at the things you were planning to do and prioritize. What are the imperatives and what were those things that were simply things that would have been nice to have? Let's get this straight. Let's reorder our lives. Let's determine how we must transact in this season, but let it not be that after this season, we immediately stop and go back. There are things that we need to replace outrightly. Okay, so in thinking about how we're doing life and how we're doing business and how we're doing marriage, there are things that we just need to take completely and move them out of our spaces. There is a reorientation that is required, and understanding that, look, one, our business is God's gift for us to use to bless the world. Our family is God's gift for us to use and preserve society. God said that He guides the destinies of generations. So when He is looking at you, He's not just looking at you and yourself. He's looking at your family unit as something to propagate His kingdom on earth. If you have the right perspective that all these things I'm doing, they must add up to what God will have us do, then even in this season where things are looking difficult, we still have to go back to, Lord, so what are we supposed to be doing in this season? And as He shows us, even where things don't make sense, we really just have to align. God told me clearly that this was going to be a strange year. Never in my wildest dreams was I imagining that strange will look what it looks like now. But you know what? Maybe part of my peace also is because I had a word. So let's allow God to be the one to shape our thinking, to shape our analysis of situations, to shape our perspectives, and most importantly, to shape what comes out of our mouths. There are things we need to rescope. In my company, for instance, we have started this humongous project, and is even in Port Harcourt, and so much money has already been spent. But you know what? We're having to look at that project again to say, okay, how much of it can we reasonably do even after this time? Because like I said earlier, there's going to be a period of recovery. How much can we reasonably do? What should we reasonably do? How should we spend? It's just a lot of questions. Just look at the scope of the things you're doing now and see whether you need to scale down, or perhaps in some people's cases, maybe this is the time for you to then launch out literally into the deep, because there is a bigger audience that's available to you if you can use technology. We can't use technology to build our tank farm, for instance. But if I'm a consultant, I know Suleiman and Fumilayo are on the call. If I'm a consultant, maybe this is when I can launch out and begin to create my trainings and programs that are global. So we have to rescope. It may be up or downwards. There is need in this season for restitution. And Whether it is a business or a personal, I just feel that this is the season where we want to be sure that we are on a clean slate everywhere. It's not the time for anger. It's not the time for malice. It's just not the time. We need to be sure that in the process of trying to harmonize our relationships, if you need to apologize, do so. And if you need to forgive, do so. And again, like I've said, it's not going to be a case of blame casting or trying to hold on to things. Guys, we can literally die in this season. I'm sorry, death is part of life. So personally, I have no problems with announcing the possibility of death. Somebody will die of something. If we will die of COVID-19, it's still death. It's not my prayer for you, certainly not my prayer for me, but it is a possibility. And what we don't want is to carry baggage on this side that may weigh us down in eternity. There are things we need to recognize. And if you actually take time and press into these discussions, these conversations, these times where you're just quiet and allowing God to speak to you, there are things that would never have come into your realm of possibilities that he will place in front of you. If you are in the right place spiritually, I promise you, you will know that some things are God things. There are areas you've never thought of going into, and suddenly they will become burning areas in your heart, or things he will keep just showing you. Every article, every movie, every book is speaking to the same thing. God will help you in this period. He will help me. We will recognize where he's leading us to those treasures of darkness type situations that I mentioned earlier. And of course, there are things that we need to reinstate. As a family, for instance, it's time to reinstate your family meals. It's not good enough that people are just all over. One is eating here, one is eating there. It's time to reinstate your prayer time as a family. On Sunday, I remember that I just pulled my children together and I said, no, it's just been too long in the process of one day rolling into each other that we had actually come together as a family to do a Bible study. And that's my truth, and I'm a minister, so I know what I'm talking about. We've done, this one is listening to a message, that one is listening to a message, the other one is in his room reading a Bible. We do online church, but somehow in that period that I've been here, we just hadn't sat down as a family to prioritize studying the Word of God together. And I said to them, after we spent like 2.5 hours, that this will not happen again. There are things we need to reinstate. Reinstate your time together as a couple just playing. When last did you have a pillow fight? If you have the luxury of a pillow fight, please have one today. I can't do a virtual pillow fight with my husband, but when we used to, it was absolute fun. Reinstate laughter in your home. Reinstate love. Reinstate all these things. Use this time. And no, don't just say we are going to reinstate it. No. How will you do it? How will you do it? Write it down. Agree it so that you can run with it. Let this not just be one of those hearers only and not doers situation, please. I'm really begging you, and I'm trusting that I'll be hearing a lot of positive results from the things that you are going to intentionally do. So in summary, and as I round up, our reality is that life will certainly blindside us. COVID is a big conversation now because it's affecting the world. It's not a case of rich or poor. It's not a case of African American or white American or Nigerian or Mexican. It's not a case of Igbo, Yoruba. It's not Christian, Muslim. It is affecting all of us. And this is why it's such a huge conversation. But reality is that life will constantly blindside us. As much as we prepare, there are some things that will just jump out at us sometimes, and it will literally take our breaths away. However, this webinar is just to remind us that being blindsided can also be an immense opportunity if we wear the right perspective and if we remember whose children we are. That this time it can be, and it's actually a gift if we will use it well. If we will press in to do all these things that I've talked about, it can be such a gift. You come out and people are like, wow, what happened? Do you remember that, the particular verse fails me now, but do you remember that Jesus said that I will be with you. He said, when he was saying that you will have trouble, and he was saying that you will go through the fire and it will not kindle upon you, that even the smell of smoke will not follow you, that you go through what, I mean, he said all those things to tell us that we'll go through. The people that come out better on the other side are those who remember that in the fire, God is with them, in the flood, God is with them, on the mountain, he's with them, on the valley, he's with them. And this is the kind of perspective that we need, new perspectives for every area of our life. Coming out of this box of negativity and fear and uncertainty that has just, sort of created this aura around everything that we're doing, and just deciding to look for what we can mine as value in every other area. How does this happen? It's about intentionally thinking things through. It's about us choosing to respond, not to react. So the minute something happens and people start to share, you know, you get something on WhatsApp, hey, can you imagine? Then we start sharing it to people that, no. How about you just step back for a minute and ask yourself, why do I want to share this? As dire as it is, can I not find something more positive? How does this help the person I want to share it to? No. In all these good things are happening, people are surviving, people are having babies, people are, I mean, come on, good things are happening. So let's choose to respond and not just react to what the enemy is trying to, you know, blind us with. My brother and my sister, see, we have been given a pause, is the way I choose to see it. That the Lord that we serve, he has just said to the world, pause. And the reason he has done that is because he wants us to sift through the way we've been doing life. He wants us to reestablish the things that truly matter, even in our businesses, because it's not only about, you know, so that we don't start thinking of it only on the spiritual realm, even though, of course, business is spiritual. But the point is that in every facet of our life, God is just asking us that, can we stop and can we think about the things that truly matter and how we are engaging the things that truly matter, how we are deploying the things that truly matter, and how we're encouraging others around us to also do exactly the same thing. One thing that is so clear is that we must come back in this season as we are, not at the end, from now, come back to the place of where we have an absolute dependence on God, and all we're doing is to try and work his priorities, whether it is his priorities for our business, or it is his priorities for our family, his priorities for us as parents, and of course, also our individual selves. So my dear entrepreneurs, you know, we're sitting on the mountains of family and business. This is why ours is such a unique space. For those who are familiar with the concepts of the 7 mountains, family is a key one, business is a key one. When the enemy breaks down families, he breaks down societies. When he breaks down kingdom businesses, what he's doing is he's taking away from the ability to finance kingdom. So you keep having situations where every time there is ministry work, there's kingdom work to be done, the children of God are going around begging. But every time there is one artist who is going to come and dance half naked on stage, people are throwing money at them. You and I need to thrive and excel at the things we do. Our families must be strong and thriving so that we don't give the enemy room. There's too much at stake for us and especially for the kingdom of God. Out of this period, we must come out with new thinking, new relationships, new business, new priorities, new strategies, whatever. This period, it must be about new, and it's new that takes us to the place of thrive. Secondly, in this period, we must emerge with wings. We can't just be broken down. God forbid that at the end of COVID, we that are supposed to be children of God, we're coming out and it is that our businesses have been destroyed, our marriages have been destroyed, our children have gone crazy. No. We must emerge with wins. Otherwise, honestly, even at this point in time, we are the greatest losers. And God forbid that that should be the case. So if we engage with this mindset that out of all this, we must win, then that's a very good place to start. And lastly, is the fact that, look, we must do the work. We must do the work. There is no way this webinar makes any sense if after you just click and close it and maybe send me a WhatsApp chat, hey, Audrey, well done, Auntie Audrey, well done, hey, good job, madam. That adds absolutely no value to me personally. In simply doing this webinar, I have moved forward. What it took for me to step in, to pray through, to ask God to show me what I need to share, to settle down, to build my slides, to think them through, to learn how to do the webinars. You know what? I have come out stronger for this. And one thing I'm very sure about is that this cannot be the last one. As God helps me, as he gives me breath and strength, I will keep doing this because he has just shown me one more thing. And in fact, probably, because I know somebody already sent me a message to say, hey, we need to monetize this. Maybe that's my next, in fact, scratch that, not maybe, definitely, this is a next stream of income for me. Even if all I will charge is 5,000 naira per viewer, it will be 5,000 I didn't have. So he has, in this process, stretched and grown me because I have chosen to do the work. I'm going to now start bringing in other resource people to join me to have some of these sessions and enrich the participation and the value that we're bringing as well. So for you, you have to do the work. It's not enough for us to just stay in the place of, oh yes, I understand now that God wants me to do this. It is faith and it is works. I have a scripture reference that I've quoted there, and I'm going to kind of end by reading that. So if you just give me a few minutes, I'm reading literally out of the Message version, and this is James 2. Please listen. I know you have your Bibles at hand, or you can still go back and listen, or read it rather, but please pay attention. It's actually captioned Faith in Action in the Message version. From verse 14, it says, "Dear friends, do you think you'll get anywhere in this if you learn all the right words, but you never do anything? Does merely talking about faith indicate that a person really has it? For instance, you come upon an old friend and dressed in rags, half-starved, and you say, 'Good morning, friend. Be clothed in Christ. Be filled with the Holy Spirit.' And you walk off without providing as much as a coat or a cup of soup. Where does that get you? Isn't it obvious that God talk without God acts is outrageous nonsense?" I can already hear one of you agreeing by saying, "Sounds good. You take care of the faith department, I'll handle the works department." Not so fast. You can no more show me your works apart from your faith than I can show you my faith apart from my works. Faith and works, works and faith fit together hand in glove. Do I hear you professing to believe in the one and only God, but then you observe you complacently sitting back as if you had done something wonderful? That's just great. Demons do that, but what does it do to them? Use your heads. I'm not insulting anybody. I'm reading the Bible. It says use your heads. Do you suppose for a minute that you can cut faith and works in two and not end up with a corpse on your hands? Wasn't our ancestor Abraham made right with God by works when he placed his son Isaac on the sacrificial altar? Isn't it obvious that faith and works are yoked partners? That faith expresses itself in works? That the works are works of faith? The full meaning of believe in the scripture sentence, "Abraham believed God and was set right with God," includes his action. It's that mesh of believing and acting that got Abraham named as God's friend. It's not evident that a person is made right with God. Is it not evident that a person is made right with God not by barren faith, but faith fruitful in works? That same with Rahab, the Jericho harlot. Wasn't her action in hiding God's spies and helping them escape that seamless unity of believing and doing what counted with God? The very moment you separate body and spirit, you end up with a corpse. Separate faith and works, and you get the same thing, a corpse. What does this mean? Faith and works. Faith and works. It is imperative that as we've listened and as we've heard, we go and we commit and we actually do the work. And let me just say again, please, let us do the work and do it together. So at this point in time, I want to stop and see if we have any questions, if we have any comments. And if we don't, it's also fine. But if you do, please type them. I'll be waiting for a few minutes, maybe 3-4 minutes. And after that, I will just, close this session. But if you don't have any particular question or comment at this point in time, and you have one later, please feel free to send me an email, to send my team. You have our number and email. And for those of you who have my number on, you can connect with me on WhatsApp, please do that. But I think it's also great after this session that you please share about the session, some of your learnings on your social media platforms. That would be excellent. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter. Thank you so much. And if I believe that's you who is saying is a lot as usual. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Always here to talk through and reminding us, of course, that I'm in this with you. It's the same experience that I have at this point in time with my husband and everyone. Okay, Lola, thank you so much. for an insightful session. She says her key takeaway from this session, we're waiting to see that. I guess she's typing. Right. Okay. Okay, Lola, I'm assuming you are writing, so I'm just holding on, but I want to thank everyone who has still been here. Okay. Ah, Suleiman, excellent. Forgive me. I was supposed to do that. I will do that right away. Okay. Yeah, so I'm unmuting everyone that we should be allowed to talk since there's not that many of us here. So if you want to say something instead, that would be excellent. Suleiman, you want to say something?
Yes, I wanted to say something first. I wanted to say thank you for wonderful presentation. A lot of learnings. And some of them we need to go back home to go and think about. But I think what has struck me is that during this period of this lockdown, there's need for us to also to spend some time, like you rightly pointed out, with our own children. It's a very interesting time. No, there's no time where we've been forced together like this. So, any suggestions on how to what do you call it, relate to the children also to will be most appreciated.
Okay, are you how old are your children?
My daughter is 14, my son is 11. They will turn 12 and 15 this August.
Oh, excellent.
Month's time, yes.
So the thing with teenagers, I think they are always in that space where on one hand, they want your time and attention. On the other hand, they really need their space. And honestly, you have to be comfortable with giving them space. At the same time, though, because there are so many distractions in this period, you know, as you are being buffeted by things, they are also being buffeted sometimes by the wrong things. So there is need to also intentionally pull them out. Being able to play, you know, they will be a bit resistant initially, but there are some kinds of play that I find that makes sense. So one, first of all, is, are you having meals together as a family? This might be the time where, even if it is just breakfast on Saturdays or twice a week, cook up as much as you can, pull everybody to the table, and no heavy conversation. It's light, it's funny. There's something my children and I started doing decades ago, and funny enough, we're still doing it now. We call it storytelling. So one person will start a story, somebody will say story, story, story. And the person will say, I'll just give you an example. One day, Chinwe was walking down the street and suddenly she saw a spaceship and she was confused. She didn't know what to do. The next person will continue with whatever comes to their mind. And before you know it, we'll go around the table, we'll have written a movie, we'll be laughing, we'll be joking. And you know, those times, the children value it a lot, right? Somebody needs to mute their mic if there's noise in your background. If there's noise in your background, please mute. Okay, so you look for those types of things. I talked about pillow fighting, for instance. You just have to go back to some creative things. If you think about hopscotch, when last did you play hopscotch? Even the children don't play that anymore. Then, are you willing to go and learn how to play some of their games? Because your son, for instance, I'm sure is a video game buff. The other day, my son asked me if I would come and play a game with him. I said no that day, but honestly, I'm rethinking it because they spend a lot of time there. Maybe I need to get into where, even though I know I'll be losing, it's still time where there's a connection. And when you are in that space, it becomes easier to have the occasional deeper conversation. But I find that sometimes parents were always trying to jump to the deep conversation. And in the teenage years, I promise you, they are not opening that door easily at all. You have to earn their trust. And then, even with your children, let me say this last thing. Please make sure that you see this respond and don't react. Please do it with your children. Make sure that you listen to them, and no matter how crazy what comes out of them, and don't jump in with one overreaction. Process it properly, so that when you want to talk, you're in a calmer place and they're also more open to what you would have to say. So I hope this helps you somehow, right?
Yes, thanks. It's been very useful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. All right. So I don't see any more comments, but I see, yes, Lola has said that her key takeaways, technology imperative. That's very true. I'm sorry, I have to mute everybody. There's a lot of noise. A lot of noise. Just a minute, please. Yeah. Okay, excellent. So there's a lot of diversifying your business is key. Technology is key. Look for value added, and family is key. Lola, excellent summation of all this. Technology is key, and we cannot be dinosaurs in this time. God is also key, so please let's not miss this at all. So I'm going to close the session now, and just saying that as the Double Impact platform, so my commitments to you as our members, to always still be here to share, to counsel, to advise as much as is required. And honestly, if you have any insights, please share. Some of us keep coming, receive useful resources that that can help someone else, all of us on the platform. If you have something that you feel all of us can benefit from, please share so I can circulate positive, reinforcing slides or presentations or articles to the members of the community. We're going to continue to curate trainings using this technology. And like I said, we will try to bring in resource people. But I also don't want to just sit back and always be the one who is trying to bring, what's it called, trainings your way. So if there are particular areas that you feel that we should be looking at, I really, really appreciate getting your feedback in that regard. We have one comment. Can I ask us to please mute? There's something that is, somebody is making a lot of noise for us. Okay, I think that was Ngozi, yeah? Okay, yes, so we have, hello? Yes, we have, what's it called? Ngozi, Sandra, when all else feels God is enough, that's right. Ngozi, yes, exercising is very key. If you have exercises with your family, that's also excellent as well. So like I said, we will continue to create these trainings. We want to remain that safe space for you as entrepreneurs. You know, the business schools deal with business issues, but we know that we have a peculiarity in the fact that we are working with each other. We have to manage each other's egos. We have to manage each other's sensitivities and so on and so forth. We have to manage our failings, and we have to manage hurts and disappointments from the past that keep popping up and trying to color the way we're interacting going forward. So this is that place where we can deal with those kinds of issues in a safe place. As you know, we are not the ones that, as we say in Nigeria, carry your matter. We just want both to grow. There are some things you will discuss that help me in my relationship with my husband and in my business and so on. Okay, so this is who we are. And I want to thank you all again for being here. We will keep standing in prayer and intercession for all of you. And please keep doing the same for me. As many of you as know my husband, reach out to him. Like I said, he's home alone, and that's not an easy thing at all for him. Thank you all so much for joining this webinar. I will communicate when the next one would be. Please invite more co-preneurs. I think that there is so much value we can gain in this space and in this time together. God bless you all. And as my sister would say, may those blessings manifest. Thank you all so much. I'm signing off now. God bless you. God bless you indeed. Amen. Amen. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.